And it was all great. I mean, it honestly shows that we should. And it's the board of sports. Pretty stuff.
You can, you're gonna have to come around.
I don't know if they're more or the map of the expand the way this property. So there's people who things like this. I mean, you know.
Good evening. I'd like to call this special meeting of the Providence City Council to order. City Plan Commission. This is a special meeting of the City Plan Commission. It is Wednesday, May 29th, and it is 4:52 p.m. Let's start off with a roll call.
Noel Sanchez, Dave Caldwell,
Charlotte Lipschitz,
Cheyenne Mandrakar, DPD staff, Bob Azar, staff,
Sharon Garner, legal counsel.
And I am Michael Gazdaco, chair. Director's report.
Nothing beyond what you're going to hear tonight about the comprehensive plan.
Okay. With that, we are here this evening to review the comprehensive plan updates as they continue to be processed by the each respective department throughout the city. We have a few new chapters this evening, and we have a couple edits to chapters. So with that, I believe we'll call Tim up.
Yep, we're going to have Tim Shea come and sort of introduce what we're going to talk about this evening.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having us again. I'm just going to share a slide deck here. Okay, perfect. So just a brief agenda for our presentation this evening before we get to hearing public comment. We're going to kind of introduce where we are in this process, the chapters that we're discussing today. I'm going to give a brief overview of feedback that we've heard thus far. The feedback and public comment process is ongoing, but just to kind of touch on feedback that we've heard on chapters that we've already introduced, not the chapters tonight. And then we're going to have an esteemed group of people who've been involved in drafting this set of chapters. So arts and cultural resources, housing, mobility, community services and facilities. And then we'll touch on next steps. But as was mentioned, so we have 9 different elements of the comprehensive plan. So far in this process, we've introduced our land use chapter, the kind of centerpiece of the plan, the built environment, sustainability, people in public spaces, and economic development. And tonight, we're going to kind of give an introduction to this last batch of chapters, which are housing, mobility, arts and culture, community services and facilities. And we're also going to talk about a few edits that we've incorporated already into the land use and built environment chapters. But of course, it's good to kind of ground this work today in all of the community outreach that has informed this draft plan and this process. So first and foremost, you know, we as people who've been coming to commission meetings in recent months have heard, and people who've been seeing us out in the neighborhoods are aware. We've been engaging with the community for over a year now in this process, really iteratively, starting from listening sessions, identifying key issues, to then using different methods to really reach people where they are in their neighborhoods, to discuss the most important issues to our community. And now we're in the later stages of this process. So as we get into 2024, we're now introducing the draft plan to the City Plan Commission. And after that, the City Plan Commission will review as we have been and vote it on to our City Council. But for people who are looking for a more in-depth summary of this process and the outcomes of engagement, we presented it at previous City Plan Commission meetings, but that summary is available at plan.providenceri.gov in the "What are we hearing so far" kind of tab. So it's been a great experience. We have been in neighborhoods around the city, and most recently, we've actually been transitioning from that feed-in period of community participation to feedback. So at the City Plan Commission in recent months, we've gathered over 60 comments on different elements of the plan. We hosted a few weeks ago, we did 5 different feedback events at neighborhood libraries around the city. So we kind of strategically placed ourselves east, south, west, north, and central, and set up for a good chunk of kind of 4 hours in an afternoon at different locations, and encourage people to come and chat one-on-one with our team and really engage with the materials in depth. We gathered over 230 comments at those events, and we've also been fielding comments online through emails and through an online form. So I'm going to talk about a few of those themes that have come out of that thus far, but this is ongoing. You're welcome to participate in a number of ways through public comment at Commission today and the City Plan Commission hearing next month. We still have an online form available for comments at plan.providenceri.gov, or you can email us directly at planning@providenceri.gov. And this is one new thing that we're announcing, very similar to kind of the library drop-in feedback events. We're going to be setting up kind of a standing exhibit in this building next week to gather ongoing comments. If kind of an online format isn't ideal, or you want to have a conversation with members of our team about this content, we're going to be set up during business hours, really at the back of this room from June 3rd to June 14th. So I'm just going to pull out some themes, one slide on each of the chapters that have been unveiled so far, of just key repeated themes that we're hearing in these feedback. So on economic development, first of all, we've heard really a lot of feedback has focused on additional areas that people want to see more focus on, more substance on. So this includes the importance of rail and transit, especially connections to Boston and New York, and how that interacts with the city's economic development strategy. We heard a lot about green, carbon-free, climate resilient forms of economic development and wanting to see that more front and center, and detailed strategies there, leveraging universities and keeping new graduates, wanting to see some more on that topic. People talking about specific neighborhood small business corridors and how we should perhaps add some language around how to encourage vibrancy there. And then more emphasis on the 195 district and the economic development that we see there in areas like life sciences and blue-green economy. One area that we've heard different perspectives is on taxation and tax policy. And this you'll see throughout these slides, there's not consensus on any of these issues. There's different perspectives. So we heard some critiques of tax stabilization agreements as a method for economic development, whereas some people pointing to tax burdens, making it hard to see the type of development that people either want to build or want to see in their neighborhood. Small businesses pointing to the commercial tax rate in the city. So I'm going to move us along here onto people and public spaces. So this chapter is really kind of focuses on our park system, and a lot of the comments that we received there were around the expansion of that system. So really kind of clarifying the city's view on where new parks should be developed. There's some language in there, but really kind of strengthening it and adding to it. looking especially at the relationship between areas where we're proposing more density and how we're thinking about green space and green space access in those hubs. And then, people thinking about long-term population growth, climate resilience, and perhaps the need for, more broad, long-term strategy for parks and greening in the city. I'll note that forestry and tree canopy, this relates to the sustainability chapter, but we see a lot of comments on this topic in particular. And I think the way we have it structured now, we have strategies that address this topic in two different places, but we've heard that maybe we need an additional kind of dedicated objective on forestry in people and public spaces. Sustainability, the main thrust of comments that we've heard were around seeing more specifics and more commitment on a few things, on things like fossil fuel emissions targets, more on hazard mitigation and flood resilience, kind of really where is the focus areas within the city that we're looking at here. Biodiversity and kind of environmental quality. People want to see maybe a bit more action or specifics around what are specific flora and fauna and how we're trying to encourage their vibrancy, their biodiversity. Public green space and tree canopy again, and its expansion. And then several comments on just highlighting how compact development and kind of density that is being talked about in the land use section relates to sustainability, and trying to highlight that. So last two chapters here, appreciate you all sitting through this with me. So the built environment and land use are the focus of a lot of comments. So the built environment really being our kind of urban design chapter. So we've broken out a few perspectives that we've heard a lot of it come through in these comments. So the first is on people who are interested in strengthening design standards, design innovation, and adaptive reuse. So both, promoting things like contemporary architecture as we're also promoting preservation. So not shying away from the new forms of architecture and design while we try and preserve what exists. But also people want to see more teeth. How do we make sure that adaptive reuse is really implemented, not just promoted around the city, and questioning whether we need additional design review processes. Another perspective we heard from is around preservation of historic buildings. So both folks who are advocating for expanding historic districts, as well as people who are thinking about those kind of the National Register properties around our city that may not be within historic districts, and whether we want to think about design review, demolition delay, and these sorts of policy ideas on these properties. And then the last perspective that we also heard a lot of commenting on this chapter is people who are concerned that too much attention to design review and to higher design guidelines and standards could slow important housing development. So people who often spoke to the city should embrace, different kinds of change in our built environment in the city, and that design restrictions can be quite subjective, and whether that should really slow important housing units. There are some people who are encouraging nuanced views. Maybe you incentivize certain types of design quality for more building massing or other things of that nature. And lastly, summarizing feedback. So land use is the focus of more than half of the comments that we've received thus far. We've laid out a few different kind of key perspectives on this slide, and I have a second slide that we've heard repeatedly. So there's feedback and critiques from kind of a more urbanist perspective. So people who often cite wanting to get rid of things like parking minimums and incentivize transit and cycling, who want to reduce requirements around lot sizes and dimensional regulations, setbacks, and maybe expand density or redefine low density. We heard from people who were bringing critiques around the future land use map and thinking about equity around our city. So where upzoning is proposed, folks particularly pointing at lower density areas that are currently identified for low density residential on the east side in Elmhurst, places like Summit and Wayland Square and Fox Point, and questioning the decision whether or not they should be redefined as more of a medium density or otherwise based on how close they are to amenities, based on the existing development patterns in those areas, as well as just kind of a sense of sharing the additional units around the city. And then on high density, we have kind of two perspectives we've outlined here. We have folks who really, have voiced opposition to higher density residential. So concerns that are often cited here around the impact on the built environment, on the character of neighborhoods, on traffic, on kind of the existence of green space in denser areas, whether there might be more demolition of good quality buildings and housing, and how kind of neighborhoods massing aligns between properties and neighborhoods, things like shadows. We had people who were really trying to refine the high density residential, so suggestions around maybe stricter design standards, topics like inclusionary zoning, so mandating affordability in some of these areas, incentivizing types of units that we'd like to see, maybe family size or home ownership, and opposition to short-term rentals like Airbnb or student housing types. And then my last slide here that summarizes feedback, still within land use, we received a lot of comments on the Port of Providence and industry in the future land use map. So people advocating for stronger alignment with the climate justice plan and decarbonization goals, kind of phasing out of fossil fuels and public health impacting industries. We heard people want to see more teeth. There's kind of a vision, a pivot towards greener industry, but really want to see specifics about how to stop different kinds of undesirable industrial growth from their perspective, or that impacts quality of life, impacts environmental quality in these neighborhoods. And two additional topics here, a lot of comments on vacant lots and surface parking, wanting to see stronger incentives for development of these land use types. And then neighborhood commercial districts. So there's discussion in the draft chapter of maybe looking at combining our current C1 and C2. So people questioning what kinds of uses are allowed and the difference between there. So comments maybe suggesting that car-centric uses should be reserved for other areas, or kind of our C3 commercial areas, and also entertainment uses being a concern. So these are key themes from a lot of comments that we've received. This is an ongoing process, as I mentioned. We're introducing the next set of 4 chapters here tonight, and we know it's going to create a lot of discussion and debate, and we welcome that, both in public comment here, whether you want to follow up and kind of dig into the materials and send some comments and suggestions online, or if you want to come back and engage with our team here in the building from June 3rd to the 14th. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Deputy Director Azar for a moment to talk about some of the edits.
Thanks, Tim. So I'm going to just talk briefly about some of the edits that we made to the built environment section and to the land use section. Tim, while I'm going to just run quickly through built environment, if you wouldn't mind, could you pull up the land use section so we can, there's a couple things I want to illustrate.
Yeah.
But with respect to built environment, I thought there were a lot of constructive comments, some from the Jewelry District Association, some from the commission, and others about how we could improve this language. So we included some language about embracing contemporary architecture and design, including language about the I-195 district, the Innovation and Design District, and their mandate. We added some language reinforcing the language about adaptive reuse, I believe it was the chairman's, comments, that we responded to about, institutional buildings that should have historic protections. And then also we added in some language about, enforcement and maintenance and stewardship of buildings. And also about, working with the state on codes as they relate to, historic preservation, as well as, the cost of construction and what reforms could be made that might address those issues. So that kind of sums up, the built environment. And then with respect to land use, were you able to pull?
Were you looking, sorry, just for these
No,
slides?
the section, the actual chapter.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I see, I'm sorry.
So, so I just wanted to talk about, first of all, the growth strategy map. Tim will pull that up in a minute. We've made some refinements there. The first thing is that we just wanted to clarify, the managed growth areas. I want to really make sure that people understand that this map is not really something that we want to rely on when it comes to zoning. This is more sort of a general illustrative map of big picture, how we see the city. So I wanted to make it clear that in the managed growth areas, there could be areas of mixed use. And one thing I wanted to show, if you just go to the next page, page 3. So we made a couple of tweaks here. One is, Tim, if you could highlight the area east of Eddy Street. We kind of pared back that area that is called industrial, what do we call it? General industrial, to show, so that we want the general industrial areas to more or less correspond with our heavier industrial districts, the M1s, M2s, and where we have areas of mixed use, those can also exist within that managed growth area. If you pan up to downtown and College Hill, you'll note that we added some subheadings for some of the sub-districts in downtown. We have a Capital Center, Down City, and the Jewelry District. And then also we clarified that boundary line between downtown and the historic area on the east side. That was from another comment that we received. Okay, so next, if we go to there's I could maybe just sort of talk through this, and I'll have you go to the zoning map in a minute. So we added a little bit of language about low density residential areas, suggesting that there could be an allowance for in certain cases, like large parcels, that we would allow for some multifamily development. Two large parcels that come to mind are the Beresford Nicholson Estate, otherwise known as the Granoff Estate on the east side. That's a large parcel with a single family house in the middle of it. There's also a parcel of land just north of American Tourister. It's a vast acreage of single family zoning, probably not really well laid out for a traditional subdivision with roads and cul-de-sacs and such. So in areas like that, we still want them to be relatively low density, but I think it would be appropriate to see to have an allowance for multifamily there. We have added language in the medium density residential areas about density bonuses for affordable housing. In response to concerns about the high density zone, specifically the R4 zone, we've introduced language about having a density regulation so that there would be a cap based on how large the parcel is, but with bonuses for affordable housing. if you go to, page 14 of the, page 15, actually, this is new, this is the map that actually shows where the zoning changes would be. And then on the next page, there's a key. There are 9 categories of map changes, and I'll just quickly walk you through those. The 1s and 2s are parcels that are city-owned parcels that should be zoned open space and public space. That corresponds with parks and schools. These parcels are currently in residential zones, and they should be in the zones that are reserved for parks and schools. So that's 1 and 2. Number 3, this is correcting a mistake. There are 2 parcels with houses on them that are zoned open space, and they shouldn't be. So we've got those slated for R3 rezoning. Those are both over next to the debate school in Olneyville. Number 4, those are primarily the R2 areas that we're proposing to turn into R3. And then 5 are primarily the R3 areas that we're proposing to rezone to R4. Not all of R3, but some of R3. Number 6 is 1 parcel on Smith Street. It's taking a commercial property and zoning it residential professional. Number 7 is primarily the C1 areas that we propose to rezone to C2. And there are also along commercial corridors, we've identified a handful of commercial properties that are in residential zones that should be in commercial zones. So that's what that is. Number 8 is a single parcel at the northern end of Charles Street in the north end. That's also a commercial property being rezoned to commercial. And then 9, there's just these are parcels that are being rezoned to MMU 75, all of which you have seen because they've come through this commission for rezoning. They're being sort of incorporated into the plan. And speaking of which, any zoning change that is in the process where it's already come to the City Plan Commission and it's moved to the council and has yet to have a hearing, we're including it in here. And if it turns out that those don't pass for whatever reason, we'll remove them. But we're trying to capture all the zoning changes that are in progress. Couple of other things. There are a couple of parcels at the request of council members, 2 in the 8th Ward, a parcel on Buffalo Court and another parcel on Mashapog Street, where there's been some interest in multifamily housing, and the councilman is supportive of a change to R4, so we've included those. And then there's a few parcels on Benefit Street that are between Thomas and Meeting Street. They're on the west side of the street. They're currently in the institutional zone, the I2 zone. They shouldn't be because they're not owned by an institution. So the proposal is to rezone those to C2 to correspond with the surrounding zoning. So that kind of sums up the zoning changes. And then the future land use map was tweaked to match up with these zoning changes. And let's see what else. On page 18, we've included language about incentivizing sustainable development, as has been discussed in this commission. I believe that about sums it up for the land use chapter.
Okay, great. So I'm just gonna re-share our slides here. So to kick off the introductions of our 4 chapters today, we're gonna start with art and cultural resources. So I'm going to ask the Director of ACT, Joe Wilson Jr., to join us.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, members of the commission, for allowing me to be here today to give you a first glimpse at the art and culture chapter of our comprehensive plan. Our chapter was developed using our own cultural plan as our lodestar. This plan was launched last year after a 2-year process, and our cultural plan continues to be the lodestar that guides all of the work that we do within the Department of Art, Culture, and Tourism. For those who may not be aware of our work, and pardon me if I, at least, I'm always assuming that folks don't know the full breadth of the work that we do. Our department is now 20 years old. Our department was one of the first of its kind in the country, created specifically in a municipality to serve our cultural and heritage stakeholders and to steward this space. We were operating in a department that worked cross-sector before cross-sector kind of became a key phrase in talking national and even locally around how we can incorporate and integrate arts into everything that we do. And that cross-sector work is because of the wide range of work that the Department of Art, Culture, and Tourism does. First of all, we permit every special event in the city of Providence. And that includes every film shot in the city of Providence. That special event permitting process, we work cross-sector with police, fire, PEMA, licensing, and parks. Everyone that has some jurisdiction in how we use public space safely are in that city service process. Apart with providing permits for film and for events, we are one of the only organizations, entities in the state that provides direct funding to artists and small 501c3s through grant making. We also have a grant making program with parks that activates our public space with musical performances. We also have an extensive public art portfolio that we navigate with the Art and City Life Commission and also the Special Committee for Commemorative Works. One body is for new art and the other body is for any commemorative work. We also manage an extensive array of place-keeping initiatives, whether that be Broad Street Stories, the Providence Commemoration Lab, the list goes on. These are also programs that we foster here in our city as valuable place-keeping initiatives. And finally, we are in the process of beginning to operationalize our cultural plan. And so it's my pleasure to be able to introduce you to that tonight in a small way. And of course, you'll be able to read the entirety of this chapter shortly. Our cultural planning process was shepherded over 2 years by practitioners who employed a variety of facilitation tactics. Our collaborative model was built around concentric circles of engagement, which enabled us to engage in a constant and ever-evolving exchange of ideas. These circles helped us decentralize the conversations taking place, allowing us to collectively eliminate hierarchy and welcome organizations and individuals to participate in a myriad of ways that best suited them. And again, this is our cultural plan process. This is the second of 2 cultural plans that we have in the 20 years history of the department. In 2019, seeded by a grant from the National Endowment for the Arts, our planning process was decentralized from its earliest stages. ACT laid the groundwork with a brilliant group of artists and representatives of arts organizations that we called sector alchemists. These individuals hailed from the Rhode Island Black Storytellers, AS220, Providence Youth Arts Collaborative, the Providence Cultural Equity Initiative, the Steel Yard, and grant makers of Rhode Island. ACT surveyed community members at in-person events in the fall of 2019. This data was used in our initial conversations with sector alchemists to begin designing the planning process. In the summer of 2020, ACT hired 3 artist facilitators who would be responsible for co-designing and co-facilitating our virtual planning events, supporting our sector alchemists across the 7 virtual planning studios and helping ACT to identify visions, strategies, recommended activities, measurable outcomes to include in our cultural plan. In the fall of 2020, we held 7 public planning studios, one for each planning theme. Artists, facilitators, and sector alchemists worked together to craft agendas, invite speakers, coordinate breakout sessions, and keep our participants energized. Throughout 2020 and 2021, ACT invited individuals and organizations to host independent focus groups. Data from the focus groups was collected using online forms and reviewed by ACT and artist facilitators. ACT and the art sector alchemists worked together in 2021 to identify key stakeholders with influence as well as positional and relational power in Providence's creative sector. These stakeholders were invited to meet with ACT and the artist facilitators to review and provide feedback on the planning document at 3 key stages of the process. Our strategies were evolved through collaboration. We incorporated all of the notes from our planning studios and breakout sessions to develop logic models for each of our 7 themes in this brand new cultural plan. These enabled us to define our plan's vision, strategies, recommended activities, and measurable outcomes. And ACT is proud to include this in our comprehensive plan. These 7 strategies include art and well-being, placekeeping in neighborhoods, the creative workforce, the creative economy, resilient nonprofits, the future of arts teaching and learning, public awareness, advocacy, and tourism. I would like to take this opportunity now to share a few of the strategies, some of which we are already employing as a department to support the operationalizing our cultural plan. Art and well-being acknowledges and addresses inequities by focusing support for creative practitioners and their communities on the intersections of art, health, and the environment. Some of these strategies include integrating the arts in K-12 learning to advance environmental and community health. And another strategy, for example, draw attention to the intersection of art, culture, and well-being. And in speaking of this section, one program that I'm really proud of that we're involved in right now is a collaboration between One Nation, One Project and the National League of Cities, along with the Providence Housing Authority, where we've embedded artists in 2 of our public housing communities to examine the value of art and its relationship to wellness. And you will of course hear more about that project in the near future, but we have artists embedded at Chad Brown and Carroll Tower, and it's a really exciting project that we are a part of a cohort of 18 cities around the country that are examining the power of art and making our communities well. Our second strategy, placekeeping in neighborhoods. Uplift and support unique and diverse neighborhoods through placekeeping initiatives that center the need and agency of communities and their bedrock artists and arts organizations. And some of the strategies include support neighborhood-based artists, organizers, and businesses who bring relevant art and live events to their neighborhoods. Commission artists to produce events, show work, and perform in unexpected sites. And another example of a strategy is to invest in placekeeping strategies that preserve neighborhood-based cultural expression and strengthen a sense of belonging. Some examples of the work that we're presently doing at ACT that answer to this strategy are our Broad Street Stories initiative, our Eli funding partnership with parks, which, as I mentioned earlier, provides programming in our parks all summer long. Also, what we have learned through the work of One Nation, One Project and the National League of Cities in examining festivals is that the importance of cultural heritage festivals in placekeeping, and we include PVD Fest as one of those placekeeping initiatives, and also the Providence Commemoration Lab. And all of the information for these programs you can find on our website at artcultureandtourism.com. The third strategy, or the third objective, the creative workforce. Support the economic well-being and growth of Providence's creative workforce. And some examples of this centralized resources for creative practitioners including by facilitating opportunities for connection and professional development between artists and cultural organizations. Another example of a strategy is to hire artists and engage creatives in the development of civic projects and public policy, including by employing and supporting artists specializing in civic engagement and facilitation. The fourth objective, the creative economy. Identify and remove barriers to the growth and sustainability of the creative sector to ensure its vitality and longevity. An example of one initiative that we are undertaking at this moment responds to furthering the development of Providence's life at night and music economy, including by funding and facilitating a life at night study and implementing its recommendations. And I'm proud to say the Department of Art, Culture, and Tourism is currently in collaboration with a vendor, and we are developing a comprehensive life at night strategy. It is our belief that while it's important what happens in this city economically from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., it's also important to acknowledge that there is valuable activity and it's an equity issue when you talk about the gig economy worker and all that happens between 5 p.m. and 9 a.m. And I take that especially personally as an actor in my former life. I worked at night, I traveled at night, I looked for food at night, I had to shop at night. And so making sure that we have a vibrant night economy and destigmatizing what it means to activate the nighttime economy is very important priority of this administration. The fifth objective is to create resilient nonprofits, foster sustainable, healthy, and resilient arts, cultural, and humanities organizations that anchor the creative sector and provide a myriad of benefits to artists, their communities, and visitors. Some examples of these strategies include developing racial equity goals and accountability structures, develop shared leadership models between government, nonprofit, and community-based organizations, and reevaluating grant application and reporting processes to center accessibility, including language access, and taking specific steps to rid applications of embedded racial bias. And in our grant-making processes, we continue to evaluate how we give out money and the rubrics through which we gauge funding, and even down to what many people are not aware of, and maybe I'm getting too in the weeds, even down to PVD Fest. We use artists to help us panel our stages, making sure that the decision-making isn't in the hands of ACT, but we always put the decision-making process in the hands of the residents of the city of Providence. The sixth objective, the future of arts teaching and learning. Commit time, space, and funding to support arts teaching and learning to ensure the benefits of art and culture can be enjoyed by everyone, from the youngest to the oldest in our communities. And some examples of strategies, these aren't all the strategies, but some examples are develop neighborhood-based, all ages arts learning opportunities, and creating pathways for BIPOC arts educators and teaching artists to work in established creative businesses, nonprofit cultural organizations, and schools. And our final and seventh objective, and a seventh pillar of our plan and our submission to the comprehensive plan, is public awareness, advocacy, and tourism. Defend and advocate for the importance of the local art and culture sector while finding equitable, profitable ways to share it with visitors and center BIPOC communities in doing so. And I'm proud to announce that ACT has already begun to operationalize this part of the plan under the direction of the citizens of this city by developing a comprehensive cultural heritage tourism marketing plan. We are in the beginning stages of disseminating that plan, but the essence of that plan is centering our cultural heritage assets that goes beyond our, how do I put this? It goes beyond us centering the colonial history of this city and centering all of the rich cultural corridors that exist in the city of Providence and here in Rhode Island. What makes this city special is not trying to out-colonial Boston and Philadelphia. What makes this city special is the fact that we are a city composed of immigrants. We are a city that is a 50% Spanish-speaking city. We are, I hate this term, but for my point here, purposes here, we are a minority majority city. That's where the power of the story of Providence and Rhode Island lies, in our cultural heritage assets. But we first of all have to know where these assets are, who are responsible for these assets, What kind of support do these assets need in being platformed and getting permission and license and agency from these assets for us to platform them in the story of who we are and in telling the story of who we are as a cultural destination for the world. So we're really, really proud of this plan. There are two main pillars of the plan, and that is first and foremost, establishing a comprehensive database that we're sharing with our partners in the Providence Tourism Council, the CVB, the Convention and Visitors Bureau, and RI Commerce to create more of an understanding of the landscape of what our cultural assets are and making sure that we can continue to support these assets and making them ready to go to market. But I think the more important piece is building up trust with these assets who have previously been left out of the conversation. As we've centered certain parts of the city and not celebrated and centered other parts of the city, ACT is working very closely with all of our partners here in the city of Providence to change that narrative once and for all. Thank you. I hope you enjoy our section of the plan.
You're the first presenter to get a round of applause after you finished. I just want you to know that. Your theater skills have not diminished at all.
Thank you for having me.
So at our meeting last month, there was an opportunity for any commissioner comment, completely up to you, Chair, if you'd like us to continue on or hold.
Yeah, I mean, I think after every section, we'll just do a quick round. This is one section I had no notes on. The only one aside from the maps that we just released. I thought it was very well written, and I look forward to more evening time economy as well, even though I spend less time outside of my house after dark now that I have a 4.5-year-old daughter. But other commissioners, anything on this chapter before we move on? Okay, good work.
Thank you.
Not a lot of comments from us either.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, so tough act to follow, but I'm going to ask Emily Friedman, our Director of Housing and Human Services, to come talk about the housing element of
Yeah,
the
I
plan.
don't know why you put Joe on first. It probably should have been, he was like the cleanup, like the last.
Good evening, everyone. Emily Friedman, Director of Housing and Human Services. And yes, absolutely. Director Wilson, who is the personification of the phrase tough act to follow. So please bear with me. The commissioners, thank you for having me here tonight. As noted, my name is Emily Friedman, Director of Housing and Human Services. The department which consulted and worked in close concert with Department of Planning and Development in drafting the housing element. So some considerations as we drafted this element and to ground us in the goals for this work. Rhode Island state law governs municipal comprehensive plan that governs comprehensive plans, sets parameters for the various elements such as housing that need to be contained in any comp plan. A housing element must evaluate housing patterns, analyze existing and forecasted housing trends, enumerate goals and policies that further the state's and the city's, hopefully, goals to promote the production and rehab of year-round housing and to preserve government subsidized housing for persons and families of low and moderate income. The goal is to achieve a balance of housing choices for all income levels and age groups, recognize the affordability of housing as the responsibility of each municipality and the state, take into account growth management and the need to phase and pace development in areas of rapid growth, and facilitate economic development in the state. The goals will be achieved through implementation, through program development to promote the preservation, production, and rehab of housing, affordable housing, and as well as affordable housing programs to further the supply of low and moderate income housing. So this element builds upon work that we've previously done through our 2020 anti-displacement and comprehensive housing strategy, as well as our 2020 analysis of impediments to fair housing. So fundamentally, the goal of this housing element is to grow, improve, and preserve Providence's housing stock to expand affordable, accessible, healthy, and sustainable housing options for all of our residents. Some common themes that you'll see throughout this housing element are that the city must encourage a dramatic increase in the production of new housing over the next 2 decades to meet the needs of our population. Additionally, we need to be ensuring that our existing aging housing stock can be effectively maintained, improved, and modified to meet the needs of our changing demographics. It's really important to note the key differences between this draft of the comp plan and our last comp plan. The market for housing is very, very different. Rather than reeling from a foreclosure crisis, we are instead now grappling with significant price appreciation and record low vacancy rates. And while we've seen a significant uptick in building permits in recent years, we are still combating decades of underproduction. And to that end, the strategies outlined within this element serve to promote the expansion and preservation of housing to meet that projected need. So our high-level objectives here within the housing element are to improve and preserve our existing housing. So that's the revitalization, modernization, and preservation of our existing housing stock. Some ways that we will serve to address that will be through a revolving loan fund, for example, for safety repairs paired with more proactive code enforcement. To produce new housing for all, support the creation of new ownership and rental housing citywide at all price points, including through the capitalization of a housing trust fund for new housing production and preservation. Develop special needs housing, promote the maintenance and development of supportive housing and facilities to ensure that all residents with special needs have access to safe and affordable housing in all of our communities. So that includes creating where we fund projects, a preference for projects incorporating universal design and accessibility, those projects paired with supportive services, and then a commitment to layer city resources strategically to encourage Okay. Wasn't sure if I was hitting something. And work to strategically layer resources to incentivize the development of supportive housing. Objective 4, excuse me, is to promote high quality residential design throughout the city. Goal 5, to promote the integration of housing and transit services. And then finally, housing in the region. We are not operating in a vacuum, so we do need to work with the state and other local governments to address housing needs in Providence and throughout the state, and work in close concert with the state to develop and align programs. And now I'm happy to answer any questions that the commission might have on this element and take any notes.
Well, commissioners. Any notes on this section?
I mean, I'll start. I think this section has a lot to do with the land use section in terms of establishing incentives for people to build housing and be able to do so with, you know, the least number of hoops to jump through. So whether that's increasing by, you know, incrementally from 2 to 3 units or, you know, new construction that I think we want to look at how we incentivize good design and good, you know, energy efficient buildings. So establishing that incentive structure around net zero buildings or, you know, fully electric buildings, I think is super important, and taking away some of the, you know, need for parking and some of the previous incentives we've had in place for maybe not residential zones, but zones around the city.
Finally got to my notes. Are you done, Charlotte? Okay. I don't want to interrupt. So it's funny because I was reading through some public comment that speaks to this as well, and I think they thought this was a bad strategy, but I like strategy H4, objective H4 strategy F, where there's a pattern of pre-approved residential designs and plans for certain types of housing that are easy to build, efficient. I think there are a lot of people who may have some extra land or may have the ability to do things, but can't fathom hiring like an architect to design something from scratch, and like they just need that little bit of help. That maybe that's something that works. And then in objective H6, I can't impart enough emphasis to more housing funding tools overall. Like you list quite a few, but I don't think they should be limited to those. I think we should be always looking for more tools to fund housing, green housing, historic housing. Advocating for all of these previous or current tools are great, but I think we should always be on the lookout for more. And I think we need to have some sort of internal or citywide housing code task force that looks at issues such as have been advocated for at the state house level, changing fire codes to match, or building code to match fire code, with like 3-family residential structures, you know, work. There's a lot of house codes and the, obviously you want safe buildings, you want habitable structures, but I feel like we've gone way too far in certain aspects of requiring too much that makes it unfeasible for people to build housing. We want it to be energy efficient. Obviously it needs to be, but then you require all of these other A, B, and C that make it virtually impossible for a normal person to build a house, because it's going to cost as much or more than to buy an existing house. And existing housing stock is overpriced as it is. So it's just it's a vicious cycle, because the more regulation you put on, the more steps you have to go through, the harder it gets. So those are my big picture notes on it. Overall, very supportive. I just think maybe we just go a little bit further and punch it up a little bit higher.
I just want to add one more thing, based on those comments. I think I guess add two more things. One is, I think anywhere in the building code where we have a major jump, so for instance, you know, requiring sprinklers versus not requiring the hardwired, you know, alarm system or not, that's where you start to see things become not feasible for landowners anymore. So I think trying as much as we can to kind of think about the building type rather than the number of dwelling units might help. And then lastly, I had made a note on objective H1 and the points about I think sort of A through D about preserving existing housing stock and maintaining it. I think anything we can do to help those who are trying to preserve, you know, their 2 to 4 family houses, and think about how we, you know, make that feasible through loan programs or, yeah, I guess loan programs is the major vehicle, but really thinking about how to encourage our sort of like smaller landowners to keep up with preserving their buildings is going to be really important moving forward.
I think part and parcel of that is education as well as funding tools. I know PPS and Noel was part of it, you know, teaching how to reglaze windows and, you know, things like that, that historic homes take a lot of work. You have to touch them every few years or they start to deteriorate. And as we can tell from the data that's in here, a large percentage of our housing stock is historic. So, you know, that's something that's uniquely situated here in Providence, and we need the resources to account for that.
I had a question about objective H1, line E as an echo, specifically using techniques such as land banking, land assemblage, and strategic acquisition by the PRA to develop affordable mixed income housing. are we foreseeing a more active role for the Providence Redevelopment Authority to acquire chunks of land suitable for affordable housing development at scale, i.e. Specifically getting into the world of the powers that the PRA has for condemnation and for acquisition and assemblage? Is this something we're getting into here? We mentioned it.
You can always contact.
Yeah.
Do you want to tag this team this one, Bob?
I can start that off. So the answer is no, we're not looking to be condemning large areas of property. The PRA has not engaged in that kind of practice in a very long time. The most recent redevelopment plan that was approved by the city was targeting vacant and abandoned houses where it was difficult, if not impossible, to figure out even who owned the house. And it had become a nuisance, and if we could demonstrate that it was vacant and abandoned, only then were we gonna be using condemnation powers or other tools that might be available to the city to get the property rehabilitated. So this is more strategic, generally gonna be involving arm's length transactions. So the answer is no to using condemnation on a large scale. Emily?
Correct. I think this is just noting here the tools that are available to the redevelopment agency, and that the redevelopment agency can serve to be a strategic way for properties that are blighted or under or slated for redevelopment to be utilized for the production of housing. So for example, the PRA may often become in possession of tax reverted properties or properties that are underutilized. And when the city is, or redevelopment agency is surplusing those properties or making them available for redevelopment, can seek to develop RFPs or disposition practices that encourage the production of housing. So many times the PRA will be issuing RFPs for vacant lots or blighted structures. And now you'll see more frequently that those RFPs include prioritization for housing.
So, one thought that comes to mind, as you mentioned, I do training. I think over the next 10 years, when this plan's in existence, we do have a shortage already of people who can build these things. And so I don't know if it fits here or somewhere else in the comprehensive plan to incentivize training as part of land development. I have no idea even if that's a thing.
For technical skills and the trades
Right.
specifically. You're absolutely right. That's going to be a huge shortage. You're uniquely qualified to
Sure,
discuss this.
that is a large problem. These are good jobs that pay very well, actually, with we think the skill level necessary for the trades required. There's a couple of bills at the General Assembly at state level right now that are gonna add a little bit of a fee to a building permit to support training, the residential level. And also another one that will bring the building code, the residential code up to 4 families. And the likelihood of those passing, we'll know in a couple of weeks, but they're right at the finish line right now. But the state, and Emily is aware of this, that we have a lot of things happen at the state for training, job training, and code reconciliation, if you will, between fire, building, and financing. That would all come into play at the state level. So that is happening. How we get that to more of the folks in Providence still being worked on. A lot of jobs out there.
And do we have someone in, and again, this might not be the place for it, but is there someone within the city government and the administration that's consistently I mean, a lot of the things we're talking about are statewide decisions. Is there someone advocating for these at the State House? I know this current speaker is very supportive of density and increased housing production, but sometimes, I mean, we are the capital city. We should be, I know that you take apart a large discussion in a lot of the stuff that happened last year. the land use commission that studied all of the changes that came out last year. And I think, we shouldn't stop there. We need to continue. This is something we need to be continuing to do every session.
Absolutely. I think there are city department heads operating on a number of state commissions. As you mentioned, Deputy Director Azar participated in the Land Use Commission and provided feedback. I participate in the Low Mod Housing Commission, and then I believe our Director of Inspections and Standards has been working on that code reconciliation effort, or has been involved. But yes, that's an excellent point, and I think perhaps a strategy that should be added is the code reconciliation idea under H6. So we've got that noted.
One other comment about this pattern book idea. I know the city of Boston is doing a very similar thing around ADUs right now. They have hired planners and architects to put together a pattern book, and I wonder if it seems worth studying how many people have sort of latched onto it once it's put out, like how basically its efficacy, because I could potentially be something that's mirrored here, although, obviously our city is very different, but at the same time, like, sort of individual landowners, willingness to kind of take on something like that and run with it would be interesting to see how well that works.
Yeah, that's kind of low hanging fruit. Like if we were able to do something and have a sort of a playbook of potential options. I mean, that seems like an easy path.
I guess my question is, at the city level, do we have anything that is workforce development related? Or, because we always go to the state, whenever I'm looking for, but is there anything in the city? School department, anything?
Absolutely. So I think that both notes that we've received about sort of education to the homeowners themselves to empower homeowners to preserve their properties, I think is a novel idea that we should perhaps think about incorporating. And then Commissioner Sanchez, to your point, the city does have a number of workforce initiatives. We have a workforce solutions office here at the city. We also support a number through the grants that we are able to make here at the city, a number of workforce initiatives such as Building Futures, Youth Build, that we've been able to support. But I think that's an excellent flag here, and for the economic development element that we really need to be honing in on the fact that the lack of an adequate workforce in the building trades, and knowing that that's sort of an issue as folks age out of the trades really needs to be highlighted here and spoken to a bit more, because we really, I think we do all recognize that that's going to be a barrier, and that's one of the reasons why construction costs continue to rise as it becomes more and more difficult to staff our construction needs.
Thank you. I think that's great.
Thank you all. Well, we've collected all those notes. We'll take those back. Thank you.
Great. Okay, we're going to keep the train rolling here. The next chapter for discussion is mobility. So I have Principal Planner Alex Ellis from our department here to speak about this chapter.
Thank you, commissioners. As Tim said, I'm Alex Ellis. I'm here to talk to you about the mobility section. So the goal of the mobility section is to provide a range of quality choices for getting around Providence with options that are safe, affordable, convenient, sustainable, and resilient. Strengthen access to opportunity and spaces for community interaction, regardless of mode of travel. Boldly embody our values in Providence's mobility initiatives and become a leader in people-first mobility. unlike many of the sections that you've seen here, the mobility section is largely focused on the public right of way. And it's the built environment to some degree, but it's not private property, in most cases. The introduction of the mobility section and this goal, are in large part reflective of the previous comprehensive plan in their basic thrust. A lot of the language is updated due to pretty dramatic evolutions in the national context around mobility. But the basic idea is pretty similar to 10 years ago. A couple of highlights from the introduction. It gets into how mobility is about more than just getting from point A to point B. It's a complicated system where access interrelates to a lot of different community goals, from resilience, efficiency, safety, affordability, climate, equity. And we have a static roadway capacity in the city. So especially with population growth, population growth leads to more traffic unless you provide alternatives to driving. So there's a pretty good roadmap from federal standards, from other cities, and from existing state and local plans. And a lot of the strategies in this section are really drawn directly from a lot of that context, along with what we've heard throughout the outreach for this plan. A couple of the ongoing initiatives that have contributed a lot of the strategies to this section: the Climate Justice Plan, the Transit Master Plan completed by RIPTA, the Great Streets Plan, the Long Range Transportation Plan from the state and all of its components, and then some current initiatives at the city and policy frameworks nationally: Vision Zero, Safe Streets for All, and the related National Roadway Safety Strategy. All of these contribute ideas to this section. So the outreach we heard over the past 2 years of extensive work, hearing from the community in these feed-in sessions, really led to a couple key community goals for mobility. One is making it easier to get around without a car and to make the city work better relating to driving and parking. So in general, those are the things very high level that we were hearing from the community over the past 2 years. So just getting into the objectives that are in this plan, they're separated by mode. So for the first 4, bus, rail, walking, and bicycling, 1, 2, 3, 4, they're all kind of similar objectives about taking the steps necessary such that the share of trips using those mode increases over the next 10 years. For driving, I'll just read the objective there. Objective 5, reduce the share of commute trips taken in private automobiles by encouraging and investing in alternatives while still maintaining quality infrastructure and connections, such that driving alone makes up approximately half the share of commute trips that it does in 2024. And freight is a little bit different because it's not passenger transportation, but it is still transportation. And the freight goal here is just improve the efficiency of freight traffic in Providence while reducing or eliminating negative impacts on quality of life. So there are a lot of strategies under each of these objectives. I'm not going to get too far into the weeds there, but I will summarize for you the strategies that are listed under each of these. And if anyone is interested in the specifics, the draft section is on the website with everything else. And you can read it in detail. So for objective 1, this was one of the top requests about mobility that we heard from all the outreach over the past 2 years. A lot of people asking for improved access to taking the bus, easier to use bus system in various ways. This objective in particular faces a stark contrast between things that are within city power and things that are not. A lot of RIPTA operations and funding are just not the city's authority. We can advocate for improvements in those ways, and strategies to that effect are included in this objective. There are some things the city can do to manage our public right of way for the benefit of improved bus service. And really, they come down to clear and comfortable space for transit in the right of way, be that bus lanes, just clarifying bus stops and making sure stop infrastructure is clear and clean and usable on the sidewalk and crosswalks. That's all stuff that is the city can do something about. But a lot of the rest of it really comes down to implementing the recommendations of the transit master plan, and that's not mostly the city's to do, but we can advocate for that. So those are the strategies largely that are contained within the bus objective, number 1. Number 2, rail, similarly, not a lot that's within the city's power, but we can advocate for rail service with the state and with the MBTA and to some degree with Amtrak, that there are more frequent trips, service is faster, electrified, service goes longer throughout the week, later in the evening. One strategy that's in the rail objective that is somewhat with our control and relates to other sections of the comp plan is to focus growth within a walkable distance of the train station. Obviously relates to the land use section a great deal. And that's the rail section. There's only a couple strategies in there. Moving on to number 3, the walking objective. A lot of these strategies relate to, fall into 2 themes. One is intersection features to improve safety, be they signal tweaks, corner bump outs, crosswalk enhancements, signal timing, that sort of thing. There's a number of strategies about that. And the second theme of strategies is really about maintenance and design of sidewalks for accessibility. So making sure that trip hazards are managed, that the standards of accessibility from the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Public Right of Way Accessibility Guidelines, PROAG, are all implemented in the city. And also, I believe there's a strategy that can look, actually, a strategy also about focusing growth within a quarter mile of commercial districts in the walking section. Moving on, bicycling. This was the topic that received the second highest number of comments after buses on the topic of mobility. And the strategies here really boil down to implementing the Great Streets Plan and implementing and updating the Great Streets Plan, and then several strategies that relate to encouragement of bicycling, from events to, what else do we say? Continuing to provide shared micromobility or bike share. Consider supplementing state incentives for e-bikes with a city incentive. Again, if you want to read all of the strategies, please take a look. Objective 5, driving. So there's a couple themes that these strategies fall under. One is sort of mitigating impacts of driving, be they safety impacts, health impacts, or other, several strategies around that. A second theme is to suggested restraints on car-oriented land use. For gas stations, drive-throughs, you know, the language on these things is not very strong. The verbs are often consider and or encourage or discourage. But those strategies are under that theme. And then finally, the third theme of the driving strategies is really around parking. And, you know, a lot of it is about adjusting parking policies to work better. Be it the on-street overnight parking program, discouraging new surface parking lots while encouraging the redevelopment of existing service parking lots, create and implement standards to increase the frequency of accessible parking spaces and loading zones in business districts, and other parking related strategies. Finally, the freight section, really a lot of strategies here derived directly from the Rhode Island State Freight Plan and from the Climate Justice Plan. But really the two themes of these strategies are improving efficiency of freight movement on the one hand, and also mitigating the impacts of freight on other uses of the city. So with that, that's the summary of the mobility section. Happy to take notes on your comments.
Okay, just a couple high level off the top. On the first page, you have the chapter. The 1, 2, 3, third paragraph down that starts with these improvements offer. The last sentence confuses me a little bit, one portion of it. Enhanced transportation and mobility also allows residents to enjoy more time, greater accessibility, cleaner. I'm thinking maybe that means enjoy more free time. Enjoy more time, just leisure time. Just enjoy more time feels like it's missing something there. The multimodal transportation network, sorry, the second page. The last sentence, the last paragraph, which is the last sentence, the transportation sector is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in the United States, with 97% of Rhode Island's greenhouse gas emissions generated from private motor vehicles. Is that true?
I believe that's supposed to say 97% of Rhode Island's transportation greenhouse gas.
That's what I thought. Which is a big difference. Let's see. One more like formatting word thing is objective M3, the letter D. It's formatted differently from the rest. So then substance. Not much here that I have to comment on. Other than like an overarching, this is a plan for the next 10 years. I think about how far EV has evolved over the past 10 years. And that's really all we're focusing on in this, as far as, you know, carbon neutral or carbon sensitive transportation. I feel like we should say like EV or other carbon neutral transportation methods. So that we're not boxing ourselves into EV, because 10 years is a long time in that kind of development. So that's like a theme throughout. Everywhere it says EV as a strategy, I feel like we should add or other carbon neutral transportation method. On M3L, I want to make sure that we're not reducing canopy coverage while fixing ADA issues. If there is an issue, we need to make sure we're replacing that canopy coverage, because that would be in conflict with other parts of the comprehensive plan that we've already talked about in previous chapters, and we're gonna hear more on tonight. Let's see, on M5P, it's discouraged new service parking lots while encouraging the redevelopment of existing service parking lots. We talked about, you mentioned the on-street overnight parking program. We really want to like discourage parking. We need to make parking legal throughout the city on city streets, and that way there's not a need to build it. We already have paved areas, like why do we need more? So maybe investigate more on-street parking programs. Something like that, because we can't put it as an objective if we don't identify it. I think that was most of my notes for this chapter. Other commissioners.
I had one note on objective M2. I think this has been brought up in a couple of our meetings, but thinking about, I think it's important for us to think about the rail system and specifically the Providence train station as sort of an integral hub to the other systems of mobility that we have. So not just encouraging development within that quarter-mile radius, but really thinking about how do people move from our neighborhoods, walking, bike, bus to that hub. And not having it be kind of a standalone piece of this plan, but rather kind of incorporated into the other objectives as well, because most people aren't just getting on the train right out their front door, they're walking, biking, or busing to the train. Or driving.
Yeah, and that was mentioned a few people's comments that I've been reading through from the general public who submitted them to different agencies throughout. A lot of discussion about housing the new bus hub near the train station or as close in proximity as possible to make it an intermodal transit hub. And that's what kind of need.
I was curious about on the bus transportation, the feedback from the public, like, are there kind of a list of, or a prioritized list of what the complaints are, what the difficulties are with using it? Was it in any of the surveys or the information collected? What are the difficulties with using the bus service? Did that come up anywhere?
Yeah, and I think, what I was citing was not a comprehensive list, because they've kept on coming in, the public comments about all these topics. But at the time I looked at it, the biggest concern was frequency of service. Another concern was affordability of service. And then there were a number of other pieces from crosstown routes to service later into the evening, a variety of things. And again, many of which would be addressed where the transit master plan implemented.
Right, and the city doesn't have any jurisdiction, right? On RIPTA. We have opinions, but we don't control. We don't. Well, because I think, when I first came to the city, I used the bus for a little bit, but it got expensive and it takes a long time to use it, right? To get from here to there. It takes a long time, so it's kind of inefficient to move around on a bus. But I think that, I don't know if there's ever been a consideration of other bus, and if the city has any way to do anything about that, that's not dependent on the state. to change the bus system in the city, because I think, you know, we're trying to eliminate or, you know, bicycling is great if you're younger. If you get older, it doesn't work that good anymore. Walking, I walked one time from here to my house, which is in South Providence. It's a long walk. So I take my car instead, or then the bus, forget it, I won't try to get the bus, but, anyway, just kind of thinking about the bus itself was, those were the thoughts. I was wondering what the complaints were and if there was any way to address it outside of it. Food for thoughts. And then on the driving on the M5, I was just looking over again and I see the use of cameras coming up a lot in the objectives, and sorry, I don't have it up right now, but cameras for ticketing and blocking the you know, controlling the speed and all that. And I'm wondering what the feedback was about that, because I remember when the cameras came out, and I don't like the cameras because I get school speed zones, you know, surprised a lot, but I know there was a lot of negative feedback at the beginning when the cameras were rolled out for the school zones, and I don't know what the general feeling about the cameras is right now.
So let me just read the two strategies about cameras real quickly. So expand, one, this is M5D, expand the use of speed safety cameras, which reduce speeding in school zones by 63%, crashes on urban principal arterials up to 54%, and fatalities and injuries by 20 to 37%. And then M5E is expand camera uses to enforce other moving violations, namely blocking the box. Those are the two strategies that they then.
Was there any public feedback on the particular one?
I'm not sure. I think generally street safety is a huge thing, public feedback, but I'm not sure if there were specific speed camera comments. We can go back and take a look.
And my wife didn't comment then because she gets those speed tickets all the time. Not to block the box though. You can,
Those haven't come out
you
yet.
can put those in everywhere. She hasn't gotten any of those yet.
That was all.
One point related to Commissioner Lipsch's point about the train station, the Green and Complete Streets Advisory Council did look at this draft last week and has drafted a letter to you that they'll deliver in advance of your next your public hearing. And what the reason I referenced that is that was one of their points about making sure walking and biking routes in particular to the train station are enhanced.
Dave, anything?
This is a tough assignment because a lot of the things here are beyond the control of the city of Providence, but I just want to be one bit of clarity. What is the number one piece of feedback regarding bus transit? Is it the lack of service? Would that be an accurate thing to say? I'm just trying to summarize that as just one.
Tim, do you remember the most egregious comments?
Was there any,
Probably you have a hit list better than anyone else.
It's, you know, without having our data in front of me right now, you know, I think Alex spoke to improving frequency of service. There's a lot of community organizing going on while we were doing our community engagement around funding the transit master plan, around improving service, but even folks who came in to engage with us at a city park without maybe the policy background. One of the most common comments there was more R lines, which I think in many people, you know, the R line in the last decade has been one of the great improvements of bus service in the city, where you can rely on 5 to 10 minute frequency without checking a schedule. So I think frequency of service really has the capacity, from what we heard, of people really choosing bus as a mode of transit. And we've kind of had this teaser in the city now of a frequent R line that has brought a lot of people towards choosing the bus if they have other options.
sorry.
Yeah, no, so along those lines too, because I think the difficulty of paying for the bus, right? You can't pay with cash.
Right.
Right? I think that's why I had to walk home from a meeting here. You can.
You can still pay with cash. There are a bunch of different ways to pay now, but yeah.
Thought cash was out, but, I remember, I didn't have exact cash, so I didn't wanna pay the guy $5 to get home if I walked. Anyway, it's a little complicated these days.
Yeah, it's just, it would take a wholesale like reimagining of our bus system, but when I travel to places like Europe, I just say like, there's gotta be a better way for us, like, we're much smaller and a much smaller state. And feels like we should have the ability to be more nimble about how to figure this out, instead of having this hub and spoke system where, even if I'm coming from here, we have to come all the way back here and then go back to there. I don't have the answer. Smarter people than me could come up with it, but I just go elsewhere and I'm like, it's so much easier to get around. And it's just not here. And obviously that's not a city issue. It's definitely a statewide. But I mean, I feel like we should be able to get anywhere in Providence, in the city of Providence, the most densely populated area, or include the other dense corridors within 15, 20 minutes. Like, we should be able to, because look at where the population is. That's where the transportation needs to go to and from those areas. And then the suburbs and everything like that, you have little dedicated areas that get serviced here and there, but like, I mean, that's like my experience in all major cities in Europe too, is, there are trains that go from city to city, but there's not a lot in between. We feel like we have to focus, bus transit on every little village in town, and I don't know that that's the best use of our resources, because that ridership is probably, I would guess, very low, considering the ridership we could have if we had efficient service within Providence, Pawtucket, Central Falls, like the areas that would actually use it. But again, I'm probably preaching to the choir here, obviously.
Private bus line. How's that? No.
All right, thank you very much, Alex. We appreciate it.
Okay, so I can see folks are eager to share their views in public comment. We have one final chapter that we're introducing tonight. This is the Community Services and Facilities chapter. So there are a lot of topics touched on in this chapter, a lot of city agencies and state agencies that were involved in the language that you see here. I'm gonna do my best to give an overview of some of the context and some of the strategies included. So, you could think of community services and facilities as covering kind of the seen and unseen services that facilitate urban life. So that includes things like water and energy, but that also includes their coordination, our 311 system, and our response to them. But in this chapter is also included what we refer to as community facilities. So these are really generally kind of publicly or nonprofit, quasi-publicly owned community hubs that bring people together in their neighborhoods, that provide services. And all of these different services and facilities are impacted by the same factors of change that impact other topics within this plan. So, some of the changing context that informed the objectives and strategies here includes climate change and climate resilience, how our services are preparing for the future climate reality, and how our facilities are preparing to help people respond in these situations, new technologies, new ways of living and working, and how we think of perhaps assets like our libraries in that context. And then how our population is growing, where it's growing, how its demographics are changing, and making sure that services and community facilities are responsive to that. So as I mentioned, there are several objectives here. This is broken out in 2 slides. This CS1 city service coordination is an entirely new objective since the last comprehensive plan. The 311 service was founded and the Mayor's Center for City Services was founded. So the objective here is to provide and advocate for accessible, transparent, efficient, and proactive city services. So this is really around kind of modernizing and continuing to improve how we respond to constituent complaints and providing a single hub for people to go to with their comments and needs. We cover several other services here: police, fire, and public safety, emergency management. I'll note the emergency management section, specifically, several of these objectives have their own entities that have strategic plans that are being updated. Our emergency management has really dramatically evolved since 2014. So we have a whole department. We have a hazard mitigation plan that's currently being updated. And so this objective and its strategies reflect kind of the most recent information there about new strategies, about how to build community capacity, respond to emergencies ranging from pandemics to climate change, weather events. There's objective on our water system. One thing to particularly note here, so water, wastewater, energy, these are all services that the city works with other agencies to provide. And so there's some language here reflecting the new, kind of strategic directions of these agencies that have been updated in recent years. Water is one in particular where we've highlighted replacing lead service lines, which has been an ongoing challenge, but there's new resources and opportunities to really do this well throughout our city. Wastewater highlights the combined sewer overflow project, which has been it's a 3-phase project over multiple decades to really improve our sewer system, our stormwater management system, and how that affects Narragansett Bay. And there's been dramatic improvements, and we're excited to see kind of the final phase of improvements of the CSO project. But you'll also note a strategy on preparing Fields Point, where wastewater is treated for the effects of climate change. Solid waste is another important section here. The city, as has been highlighted in some recent news, like we were falling short on our recycling goals and our composting goals. So there's language here around kind of transitioning to better composting systems, to really building the capacity of composting that exists today, and improving our recycling numbers. In the energy objective, I think the biggest change to highlight here, although there's a set of strategies, is preparing to transition to renewables and phasing out fossil fuels. So there's several new tools that the city has here that we didn't have in the past. Our community choice aggregation is one tool where the city's going out and helping us competitively search for better supply and more renewables in our supply. Transitioning then from energy to these three are kind of the objectives that amount to community facilities. So we have an objective on schools, which is, you could think of the strategies here as broken into strategies that affect the educational outcomes and achievement of students versus the physical buildings and improving the learning environments in which students learn and study. And so there's a lot of updated strategies here that align with the city and the state's district turnaround action plan, with the goals and benchmarks of the return to local control cabinet that the city of Providence has, but also more on improving school facilities. This kind of model of looking at more pre-K through 8 buildings, thinking about fewer school buildings and how we prepare for that in the decades to come. And then library services, I'll just mention briefly. So, recreation centers, community centers, and library services, a lot of their strategies focus on programming and services and how we're responding to the needs of our neighborhoods and trying to make sure there's alignment with how our neighborhoods are changing, and also giving them people opportunities to build their own capacity to solve challenges. So resilience hubs is a new concept that's come out of the climate justice plan that's reflected in especially the recreation center objective here. But there's many more aspects here, thinking about serving all ages, not just youth in our recreation and community centers. And so this chapter covers a lot. We are excited about the direction of it. I think pulling it together is a really exciting challenge for our planning department to reconnect with all these agencies who are all doing their own work, thinking about the next 10 years in the same way that we are, and how we prepare for change and for growth. But that is my introduction for community services and facilities.
Thank you very much. So I just have a handful of notes. Under objective CS4 water, we talk about replacing lead service lines to, houses and things like that. So I did that. I worked with the Providence water supply, went through their program. They have a contractor who comes out and they do it, and it takes a while, but they come and they replace your lead service line with a new copper line. While he was there, the contractor doing the work, now this is Harrison Street on the west side. He was like, well, yeah, this is great and good, and it'll lower your lead amounts, but you still have a lead service line in the street, and until they change that, you're still gonna have lead in your water. He's like, I see this all over the city, and there's no plan to replace the mains. There's only plans to replace the service lines going into the houses. So that should probably be called out a little more emphatically, because we're not really eliminating it, we're reducing it. But this program to replace the little trunks that come off the lead service line is only one part of the puzzle.
Yeah, Tim, can you look into that? I do think that they do have a plan to replace mains as well. But
Maybe.
But if they do, we should note that.
Yeah, and maybe the contractor didn't know what he was talking about, but he did know he was tying into a leaded main. So that's something. And I got my results back after it, and there was still lead, not as much, but there was still lead. So I'm using I can't remember what the filter is that they use it, but I use that for all drinking water. Because I have a 4.5-year-old daughter and I care about that. So there was something about schools. I thought, as schools are a big community asset, and focusing on them as potential community centers, I think, should be a priority. Safe places for people to go, obviously not while school is in session, because you can't have the general public in and out. But I think about, like, when I was growing up, a school was like the neighborhood center. And it used to be that way here, when there were neighborhood schools. Like, there was programming and activities after school and things like that. I just think there needs to be a little bit of emphasis that's probably a really good thing. I can't help it. My editor brain, because that's what I did a long time ago. Page 12, library services. Some community libraries of Providence, since Community Libraries of Providence was founded in 2009 to take over the management and operation of the neighborhood libraries, both organizations have completed significant capital improvements. What's the
Yeah,
other, what's the
that's,
other organization?
that's,
We only talked about one of them right there.
yeah, I think that's referring to the Providence Public Library downtown versus the community libraries of Providence, but we can clarify that.
And then library services, again, they're such a community center. That should be called out as, you know, something to protect. Because they're a community center also, and they have programming and things outside of, you know, normal school hours, but also for community activity, events, gatherings, information sessions. I met you at quite a few of them. Like they're just really hubs of communities. So that's really my main points for that section. Other points from other commissioners. Charlotte really wants to talk about the design of the new school buildings that are talked about here. Quality design for new school buildings.
I'll talk about
I'll say it for
population.
you. How about that?
If we get the housing built, we'll fill a lot of those empty seats that were projected, so, we're just paying attention to that. If we can get the unit count up, then we've got some flexibility in filling all those empty seats. We're projecting like 5,500 the next 10 years, something like that. So let's get some housing built to the second plan we had tonight.
Sounds good. Are we, is this time where we should take a little break? Because we have maps and we have existing conditions, and then we'll have some public comment. So let's take, you.
Yeah, if I might, just on existing conditions and maps, I'm not sure we need to really run through that unless you feel that we do. I think they kind of, those sections sort of.
No, I mean, I
speak for
have a
themselves.
couple of actually only typographical proofreading notes.
Okay.
I just have, so I just think, I urge, all of you to read this because it's actually really good information. Some of it surprised me, some of it I said, absolutely, that's true, but some of it wasn't a surprise. So it's good information that to use when considering, everything that went into this plan. So with that, how long? 20 minutes? 10 minutes, yeah. All right, we'll take a 10-minute break. It is, we'll say we'll come back at 6:55. That's 12 minutes. So we'll come back at 6:55.
Sure, and we have a sign-up sheet in the back, so please sign up if you'd like to speak. Thanks.
call this special meeting of the City Plan Commission back to order. Not anything other than the City Plan Commission. So please, take your seat and, we will get right back into it. Again, we've reviewed all of the chapters. I'm sorry, can we stop side conversations in the room, please? Thank you. If you have a conversation you want to continue, please take it outside those doors. So we went through all of the chapters, the revisions of the existing chapters, the new chapters. There are 2 appendix that were also drafted. Again, existing conditions, which we really don't have to go through in detail, because that's all just data. And then there are, again, informational maps, which is appendix B. I don't think there's much to say about either one of those. So with that.
Yeah, one last thing, actually, there is a requirement that we have what's called an implementation element that basically takes all of the goals and objectives and strategies and lays out a timeline for their implementation and also the responsible party. We have that drafted, but I think we're not going to be. We want to get feedback so that if we end up changing any of the sections, we don't have to have a new iteration of the implementation matrix. So that's the last remaining item at this point, but you'll see that next month.
All right, then, with that, this is a public meeting and we have discussion that I am sure will want to take place now on these new chapters. Again, we take comments from members of the public. You can email them to Tim. We've been over that. There's a link on the website on the City Plan Commission page and on the comprehensive plan cover page. And then obviously the planning staff can also take comments in addition to what we have tonight. So we will go through our people that are here in the room, and then we'll ask if anyone joining us online would like to chime in. We have a decent amount of people, so let's go through. We'll start out with Paula Donovan as our first commenter. Yeah, we're gonna start, when you come up, please state your name, your address. I'm going to put a time limit on, we'll see how we go. Maybe we'll be able to do a little bit more later. But we'll start like normal with a 2-minute time limit to make sure everyone, gives everyone enough time to speak on the matters they care about.
Okay. Thank you very much. My name is Paula Donovan and I am a resident on the south side of Providence in the Elmwood neighborhood. I live at 67 Lenox Avenue. And I'm focusing my comments on the housing section for this evening. Specifically, in the first paragraph in the housing section, there's a statement at the end about not impeding housing production. And I feel that that is a very vague and too broad of a statement. As a community person who has been very active and working to improve my neighborhood, I would like to see what is an example of an impediment, because I'm afraid that that would be used against community organizations, neighborhood organizations who are critical of some of the housing developments that are proposed in our area. So I believe that the term impediment needs to be defined. I think that there are aspects of development that are need to be addressed, such as the impact on infrastructure, parking, transportation, traffic, even on our schools. There is a very high level of development happening in the north end of South Providence, which could have very dramatic impacts, especially, I think, on our schools. So I think that that needs to be addressed. The fast tracking the production of housing, I don't believe is a positive element or a positive position for the city to take. I'm concerned that it's going to be used to benefit developers and the CDCs and not the at-large community that is going to be affected by those developments. I believe the city must focus its efforts on meeting the needs of the current population. In a lot of the meetings that I've gone to, the city is talking about how the population of Providence is going to grow and that they're looking at population growth of up to 250,000 people, which Providence hasn't seen since, I don't know, the 50s or 60s, before the highway was built, when we had a lot more land available for housing. I think, so I actually looked up the population, the current population. It's been a small decrease, but the Providence population has been decreasing in the past couple of years. So I don't know what's affecting that or what's causing that, but I think, you know, this idea that our population is going to grow, we might need to take a step back from that. We need to stop the trend of flipping properties. I myself, I own a 3-family, and I get innumerable requests from people who want to invest in my neighborhood and buy my property for cash. And I really am not interested in selling my house at this particular point in time, nor am I interested in selling to an investor, because I believe that investors, the flipping trend has destabilized my community in particular. And it contributes to the exponential rise in costs that properties keep flipping and they keep, you know, jacking up the price of these properties. I think also too, I think the city perhaps might also need to take a step back because I am a little worried foreclosures seem to be increasing. And are we headed for another housing bubble? So, you know, this plan is all focused on growing housing. But what does that mean? What lessons did the city learn from the last bubble? And how are you going to deal with the next one that is probably not far down the horizon?
You have some really good points. You're up on time, so can you just bullet point really quickly the rest of them?
Yeah,
Because
so
they're very,
I
very
guess
good points. Thank you.
I want the couple of things I want to make sure is that in the anti-displacement and comprehensive housing report, there is wording in there about how the city needs to move away from concentrating housing, affordable low-income housing in certain neighborhoods, and that is not addressed in this comprehensive plan. And I would hope that all these commissioners would read that plan, that report produced in February of 2021, and incorporate those comments. I believe that this comprehensive plan is not a community sensitive policies, does not demonstrate community sensitive policies, but I believe it is abdicating the city's responsibilities to provide safe and healthy living environment to other forces at play here, those who have access to legal resources, financial resources, and political resources to push their agenda on preserving and enhancing their wealth opportunities. And I just want to say one last comment is regarding your comment about community services and facilities. I will say that in our community has put forward an idea called Common Ground for Knight Memorial Library, Gilbert Stewart School, and the West End Recreation Center, which are all within a stone's throw of one another, to create a common ground campus that would meet the needs of the community. So that's a creative idea that is coming from the community, is not coming from the city, and it is not coming from a developer. So I think the city needs to pay more attention to the people who are living with the decisions that the city makes. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul Flynn, you're up next.
Hello, good evening. My name is Paul Flynn. I live on 27 Preston Street in Providence and Fox Point. Thank you to the committee. Thank you for your time. Thank you for this document. I'm standing up, or I guess in this case, sitting down, in support of the changes outlined in the comp plan, specifically, the housing section, which we talked about tonight. Why? Look, I'll be the first one to say it. I won't be the last one. Last year, Providence led the nation in rent increases. This is a serious problem. It needs to be addressed, and it can be addressed by building more housing. But this isn't a new problem either. This is a result of a long-standing approach to housing in Rhode Island. Since 1984, nationwide, we're second only to Seattle in the increase to the cost of a single-family home. That isn't an accident. For almost as long as I've been alive, zoning regulations have made it difficult, expensive, and time-consuming to build new housing. Given that, the changes proposed in the comp plan are good. They're wonderful. I hope they get enacted. I absolutely support them, but they aren't enough. I'm up here telling you and the committee to embrace change, but we did get some things right in the past. One of them was civic pride. I'll tell you an embarrassing fact about Providence. We are the third largest city in New England, behind Worcester. It didn't used to be that way. As recently as 25 years ago, we were the second largest city in New England, and I think we should be again. And that's not a knock on Worcester. It's a great town, but we are amazing. We have the Narragansett Bay. We have world-class universities, hundreds of years of history, a diverse community, and a vibrant arts industry. We should be giving Boston a run for their money. Another thing we were right about in the past, growth is good. More housing means more construction jobs, more tax revenue for the city, and a greater chance for people who work in the city to be able to afford to live in the city they're contributing to and building out. And most importantly, more housing means more people get the opportunity that I've had for the last 20 years or so to live in Providence, to enjoy it, to appreciate it, and to welcome others into our community. Sharing is one of the most basic values. It's one of the fundamental things that we teach children at a young age. We need to share Providence with the world. We need to make it an affordable city to live in. Thank you.
Thank you. Cameron Lafreniere. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Close? Thank you. I'm sensitive to it. I have a difficult last name.
Of course. Thank you. My name is Cameron Lafreniere. I live at 115 Butler Ave. I would like to display my Bike to Work shirt for RIPTA, one of their great campaigns to make this city more bike friendly, to increase the number of people that actually bike. One of my biggest problems with the mobility chapter is that we say increase and not double, triple, quadruple, because the existing mode share of bicycling in Providence is around 2%, and that's unacceptable, given that we have a built environment that is frankly takes about half an hour or less with an e-bike to get across the entire city. Yet, frankly, there is not the facilities, nor the storage, nor the accessibility, nor the safety to do so for many people. I believe one of the people in this room mentioned that it's difficult for elderly people to bike, and for people that, not necessarily elderly, middle-aged people, people that have, even young people that I have cystic fibrosis. I mean, many people that I have, have my disability are unable to walk up the stairs even. This is something that we need to take seriously. Spin is not a micro mobility solution. I was in Pittsburgh at a conference for 2 weeks. They have $4 half an hour bike share. Boston has a $100 subscription a year. It's unacceptable that we would call ourselves a world-class city without a world-class transportation network. And that includes something we can do, unlike RIPTA, which is to have a city bike share program, something was going to happen and never did. And you see the dead carcasses all over the city of this exact issue. I'd like to take issue furthermore with my neighborhood, Wayland Square. It seems that we've in this plan
prioritize the existing housing owners over the existing renter population, which is in the same community. This is not some isolated place with all single-family homes out in the middle of nowhere. This is a urban community that deserves urban zoning and R3 zoning because it is a high-density transit corridor. And if H7774, which is the bill to fully fund RIPTA, gets implemented, we will be stuck with a low-density, high-transit corridor, and that is unacceptable. And that is unacceptable on Hope Street. It is unacceptable on Atwells Avenue. It is unacceptable, frankly, for the existing zoning that's shown on North Main Street for the existing R line. Like, this is the most important issue. Housing and transportation will not happen together successfully if they don't exist together. And frankly, I've been lobbying on the House floor. These people represent, districts all over the place. However, our existing density, even in the city of Providence, isn't high enough for these people to be necessarily convinced. So we need to upzone in all of these areas that would be funded with the TMP. So like, we need to take this seriously and not just say, oh, well, we could like adjust a little bit. Within a walk shed, we need to provide high density transportation and high density housing. So we really need edits to this plan that reflect that, no matter how wealthy the community is. I don't care. I'm not going to be able to live in Wayland Square much longer if I have a family, because frankly, apartments are about, I can't buy a condo for less than $600,000. So thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Tyler Romero. Christian Roseland, you're on deck.
Good evening. My name is Tyler Romero. I live on the east side of Providence at 174th Street. I've been to a couple of these meetings and of course been to other neighborhood meetings around the city, including at the Rochambeau Library. And I just wanted to highlight a little difference between urbanism and the reaction to urbanism. Urbanism is concrete and pragmatic. Increase organic density growth along pre-existing transit corridors without significant government interference to address the housing crisis. Versus the reaction to the urbanism, which is a focus on the aesthetic. It's amorphous, light, character, history. And while looking at this plan here, I'd encourage you to resist the temptation to chip away at the plans that you have to accommodate unelected and self-appointed neighborhood groups that have a significant financial interest in maintaining the financial status quo of high housing costs. Talking a little bit about the plan in front of us, I wanted to highlight that the existing transit corridors should be labeled C2 at a minimum. This is because an increased density citizenship would organically induce the demand for small local businesses, food islands, and general goods in reach of everyday citizens. Concerning housing, we just can't be innovative with modern housing concerning light, efficiency, space growth, and safety when you also increase the mandates and regulations needed to build the home in the first place. I'd encourage the plan to continue to seek ways to streamline and make ways available for organic growth to happen by right, so that housing can be addressed within the community themselves from a bottom-up perspective. I wanted to briefly talk about mobility. I bus to work almost every single day. I'm lucky to be able to live on an existing transit corridor. Busing is cheap and accessible, and I hope we can continue to find ways to improve it. Briefly on cameras, no offense, but if you don't like the consequences of speed cameras, I suggest going the speed limit. 44,000 vehicle deaths per year in the United States. I think it's important to take mobility safety concerning cars seriously. Finally, people are going to come to Providence whether we like it or not. I like it. We can either prepare for it or we can suffer the consequences. In general, I'm really impressed with the plan and I've really enjoyed the presentations and comments that you've made along the way. It's dense and articulate in positive ways. Please keep pushing for more progressive growth. Like I said, I currently live on the east side of Providence, a privileged and at this moment, non-dense neighborhood, and I welcome new neighbors and businesses in my neighborhood because Providence is for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Christian, you're up. Claudia Wack, you're on deck.
Thank you. Thank you so much. My name is Christian Roseland. I live at 842 Hope Street. You know me, I've spoken here before. Of course, I'm with Providence Urbanist Network. I want to commend the job that you guys have done with this plan. I think it goes in the right direction. I think that it has good goals and good values, but I also think that the devil is in the details. In particular, I want to call, my notes, in support of the language to remove the impediments to building more housing. This is extremely important. We are in a deep housing crisis. Right now, this may not affect those who own 3 units, but for those people who are renters, which is 60% of the population of Providence, more than half of them are rent burdened, meaning they pay more than 1/3 of their income in rent. The problem is we don't have enough housing for the number of people that want to live here. And whether we like it or not, they're coming. The solution is to build more housing. So if you want to do something to serve the needs of the majority of the people who live here, you will continue as you are doing in favor of building more housing. I also call on you to resist the sort of changes that undermine the goals of this plan, such as onerous standards, dimensional restrictions, mandatory design reviews, etc. Some of these changes are being requested by those who have a financial stake in keeping housing prices high because they work in industries that benefit from high housing prices. I also call on you to go further to remove restrictions, like allowing smaller lot sizes. Also, in medium density zones, 3 stories is not enough. We need a minimum of 4 stories. But let's talk about what's at stake here. We had a gentleman from the city earlier tonight talking about arts and culture. Arts, culture, and music need artists, actors, and musicians. Those aren't professions that pay a lot. Artists, actors, and musicians need affordable housing if they're going to stay here and if we're going to have a culturally rich city. That's what's at stake, is the future of this city. So please do not allow a small group of self-selected people who have a financial stake to undermine that. We also, finally, I like the language in here about the alignment of transit and housing, but we need to do more along those lines. The growth corridors, right now, I don't see how those are manifested in the proposed zoning map. Every street that's along a growth corridor should be a minimum of C1 if it's to actually be a growth corridor for everything along that street. Everything within a 1/4 mile of an existing high-density transit line should be at least R3. That's just, if we're gonna live up to the ideas of that plan, and that includes in affluent neighborhoods like my neighborhood, Summit, which is still low density, much of it's R1, even though we're right next to the most frequent transit line in the state. So if we're serious about confronting the housing crisis, we need to act like it. You've got good goals, you've got a good start, but I strongly encourage you not to allow those goals to be undermined in the details. Thank you.
Thank you. Claudia, and then on deck is Sean Sierra Paul Pater.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Claudia Wack. I live at 22 Hart Street, and I want to speak in support of the vision that's articulated in the draft housing chapter of a wide variety of housing types distributed equitably around the city. I think that's a great summation of where we need to go, and I'm very much in support of that. To echo what the previous commenter said, though, I think there's some low-hanging fruit that are sort of left unplucked in terms of what this plan is proposing to do in order to meet that demand for housing. So I think getting those technical details right are really important. If you look at the existing land use map in, I think it's Appendix B4, you'll see that there's many parts of the city where there's 2 to 5 unit multifamily in these communities, and yet the proposed zoning map proposes to leave them at very low densities. So we still have this mismatch between the built environment and the proposed zoning updates, even though there's a dramatic need for upzoning. My takeaway is, there's a lot of good stuff in there, but please consider going further, because otherwise I think where we're gonna land is, what I like to think of as higher rents and more tents, which is not a place that I think we want the city to go. Lastly, on a totally separate note, on the topic of mobility, to the point of some of the discussion here, there is a lot that's not in the city's control, but I would urge you to do what you can to upgrade mobility facilities, make the streets friendlier and more comfortable for public transit riders. Just the other day, I was at the Corliss Street Post Office, and I saw this woman who was a senior, and she was sitting in the middle of the sidewalk. She had one of those walkers that also has kind of a seat sling. So she was sitting in the middle of the sidewalk, and she had her coat over her because it was pouring rain, and it was very odd looking. So I went over to her and said, like, ma'am, are you all right? And she said, oh no, I'm all right. I'm just waiting for the bus. Because I didn't realize until she said that she was waiting at the bus stop, but there was no shelter, there was no nothing. So she just had to sit in the middle of the sidewalk on a sling with her coat over her because it was pouring rain. And that was just such a shameful moment. So I really would urge the city to, do whatever it can within the scope of what's within its powers. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Sean is up and Jennifer Laura Lee on deck.
Hello, my name is Sean Serapative. I live at 137 Rochambeau Ave, or at least I do right now, which is why I'm here to comment today. I've been here a few times. Some of you, well, maybe you don't recognize me yet, but I recognize all of you. I've been to a lot of these meetings. I really love Providence, and I really love the development process in the city. But my lovely apartment in the east side on Rochambeau is up $500 a month from 2 years ago when I moved in. So I can't live on the east side anymore, despite a pretty good job with the state. And when my wife and I looked around at other places to rent, maybe on the east side, there was nothing for less than a mortgage. So we said, you know what, I guess now's the best time as any. We might as well go looking. And I spent about 2 months spending all of my free time looking for a house with a much better than average Rhode Island resident's budget, or at least better than a Providence resident's budget. Nothing enormous. I do work for the state, but and not finding very much, and finding a lot of two-family houses in neighborhoods that are all triple deckers and bigger, but are now zoned R2 with an empty basement that's, strangely got hookups for a kitchen and a wink, because by current zoning, they can't build anything denser, even though they're completely surrounded by denser properties. I've seen a lot of places that are quite explicit in their listing that they're investment properties to hold on to speculate for future things. And what I've seen very little of is anything that I could afford. So a earlier speaker asked why our population has gone down, and weird things with the ACA aside, it's because the only house my wife and I can afford within bus and bike distance of Providence is not in Providence. So I won't be living here much longer. I'll be in Cranston, unfortunately. Not that Cranston's bad. I like Cranston. Rolf Square is pretty cute, but it's not Providence. And that's real. That's where those numbers go. Lots of us live for when you rent, and then if you want to buy, if you're gonna have a kid, good luck. There's just no supply, and what there is really expensive. I had houses go for 110K over list. I had houses sell while I was in the tour of the facility or of the unit. And everyone you talk to, all the real estate agents, all the people selling their houses, is all the same story. There's no supply. You can ask whatever you want, and you're gonna get it. Because there's just nothing there. I would have loved to live in a dense condo on transit because I am one of those unicorns that I've been told many times don't exist in the city that doesn't have a car. I ride my bike and I take the bus, and my wife usually does too, unless she really, really has to drive. And we would love to not have a car. So when you're looking at these developments, I'm sorry I heard that bell. When you look at these developments, keep in mind, there are plenty of us who would love to live here and can't. There are plenty of us who would love to live here and don't need anywhere to park that car. And when you're approving these zoning changes, keep in mind things that'll actually pencil. Upping the zoning slightly doesn't matter if nobody can actually build something there. That'll get them back construction costs, because those are wicked freaking high right now too. So keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Jennifer, you're up. Greg Garrett, you're on deck.
Thank you. My name is Jennifer Lorelli. I live at 16 Pratt Street on the College Hill. So I have comments on the mobility transit section and housing. On transit, specifically bus, I'd like to see some aspirational language, such as to bring Providence bus service to an enviable level regionally. I don't see any, again, aspirational level. A strategy point might be Providence officials will plan to meet regularly with the new RIPTA chairperson and related state officials. You commissioners are correct. We need to do much better. We can do much better. And I feel some sense of defeatism that we can't work with RIPTA. Well, we haven't been able to, but there's no reason why we can't demand to do better under new leadership. So good job. I think you're on the right trip on that. So on housing, in reading the plan's details earlier this week, I looked for mention of strategies to do better job with unresponsive absentee landlords or slum landlords. If it's not included in the plan, please consider putting it there somewhere. I appreciate the persistence of this particular commissioner, I don't know your name, to promote education or apprenticeship programs needed for the building trades in Providence. You were persistent on that. You need to be. Thank you. On that note, is there a current program or could there be included a built-in incentive for builders who use apprentices so that you get a tax break or you get a whatever if you use apprentices? This is a good idea for building skills for people who live in Providence or want to come to Providence, young people who are graduating from high school or college, building value, building pride, building a population which might then choose to remain in Providence by living and working here, building here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Greg, you're up. Kate Shapira's on deck.
Good evening. My name is Greg Garrett. I live at 37 6th Street. The first thing I'll comment on is the mobility. The state is, of course, thinking about moving the bus hub. And you may feel like you have no power, but if you put in the comprehensive plan that the city comprehensive plan says that the bus hub shall remain at Kennedy Plaza, it might make it a little harder for them to get permits to move it. And since none of the riders want them to move the bus hub, anything you can do to strengthen the city's hand to prevent the moving of the bus hub from Kennedy Plaza would be very useful. I think you should really put that in the plan. I have submitted written comments on a lot of things, but and we didn't talk about it tonight, but most of the stuff that I've worked on is the economic development. And one of the things in the plan is to talk about the growth of the medical industry. I may be the only person in Rhode Island who's talking about it, but I'm talking about it with Miriam Hospital right now when they're doing their expansion. And I'm saying, so what does your expansion do for the price of healthcare? And you can say, and they don't have an answer, but I do have an answer. It means they expand, our healthcare costs more. And so every one of the things that they're doing to grow the medical industrial complex in this country increases the cost of healthcare when we already lead the world in medical bankruptcies. So to have a strategy around the growing the medical industry, which in the time where the life expectancy is going down rather than up, you might want to say, stop the growth of the medical industry. Start to focus on public health rather than on private health. And do things like that. And then the one other thing I will talk about is the fact that when we talk about industrial and where we want industry, don't keep putting industry already in burdened communities that already suffer from too much air pollution, too much traffic. Do not put more industry there. You have to start to say we're going to spread the industry around the city, and that all of the industry coming in has to be cleaner than what's leaving. And so as long as we continue to have industry that comes in that is dirtier, then the people who are living here will get sicker. And, you know, we already are among, you know, the top 2% in the country in some neighborhoods in asthma. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Kate, you're up, and then Steve Alquist is on deck.
Hi, all. Kate Shapira, 4 Brighton Street, in Providence, on the west side. Thanks for drafting a plan. Thanks for all of the opportunity for public comment that you have provided and will provide. I do want to note that when I look out at this group of people who have all made really excellent points, I do not see the Providence that I know. I see a much whiter, a somewhat older, and a more able-bodied, apparently, Providence than I know, although that's not always something that can be seen. I'd like the commission to consider holding a hearing that is a little later in the day and that provides childcare. I think that would make a big difference for a lot of families in the city to be able to contribute, and I hope that you will do that. My other point, which I'll keep brief, has to do with housing. Both the plan and many of the commenters tonight have mentioned the need for more housing stock, and I definitely endorse that. I hope to see that built, and a variety of price points. Also hope to see that built. What I would also add, though, is that if you build more housing, especially rental housing, and there's no plan for rent stabilization, problems with gentrification and unaffordability will continue. So I'd really like to see some sort of plan for rent stabilization in this plan. I'd like to see it concrete, I'd like to see it specific, and I'd like to see it enforceable. I think if there's more housing, there are people in this city who will just see the opportunity to raise their prices over and over again, and that's what we've been seeing so far. So I think to see a real change in affordability in the city, we need both. We need more stock, and we need a ceiling on its price. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Steve Alquist is up, and then we have Sharon Steele on deck.
Hello, Steve Alquist. I live at 26 Ogden Street in Providence on the east side. I just have notes I took during the meeting, and they're not in any particular order. I was a little disturbed to hear that the map that was shown earlier is not something to be relied on. I would like to see maps that are reliable. The port area, the development map, the area around the port was recolored green, which is the most literal greenwashing I've ever seen. I thought that was funny maybe, but also not a little sad. I'd like to see actual changes to the plan that reflect the problems in the port, especially around things like the asthma rates that people talk about, and the fact that the people who live there are some of the most put upon people in the country for environmental justice issues. As art and cultural resources section, we lost a cable car a while back, and the Columbus Theater is now at risk, and it would be interesting to see something in the comprehensive plan that talks about venues when it comes to the arts and how we might hold on to those. I didn't hear much in the housing section tonight, and I haven't read the report yet because it's just come out, but I would like to see more about climate change when we talk about housing. I'd like to see more about how we're going to deal with that within there. Maybe it's in there, I don't know. Mobility bus issues, moving it to Siberia, as the governor once said, cannot be an option. Staying in Kennedy Plaza would be the best option, but you know, even the idea of maybe increasing it around the transit might work. I'm not sure. Another thing, we might want to push for more say for Providence on the RIPTA board, maybe having a Providence City Councilor be put on the RIPTA board in a more permanent way, or someone who cares about transit, who comes from Providence, and speaks for Providence transit issues on the board would be something that we could push for. When we talk about the quality of the community libraries, I think it varies wildly. We talked about the community libraries, how important they are, but if you go to Olneyville and you go to Rochambeau, these are extremely different spaces. And we should be thinking about how we get Olneyville or Knight or one of the other smaller libraries up to the level that we see at Rochambeau. And then we'd have a true community space. And my last point, which I'll do very quickly, is we should consider 95 running through the city and think about seriously eliminating it. Moving people onto 295, right? Half the traffic that goes just passes through, leaving all their pollution and bullshit behind, going from Hartford or wherever south to north, and we get nothing for that except their pollution. We can have nice little roads in, nice little roads out, but we can get rid of that, reconnect neighborhoods, rebuild the entirety of Providence that way. And the amount of open space we get from that, the amount of development we get that, housing, restaurants, businesses, whatever you want to talk about, I-95 lane times 27 north, whatever many miles that is, would be crazy. So I know that's stretch goal, but keep it in mind.
Karen Steele? Also, if you're joining us from home and you'd like to speak on this, please raise your virtual hand, the bottom middle portion of the screen, or if you're calling in, press *9.
Thank you, Michael. Chairman, thank you, commissioners. Thank you for the time that you give to this committee. It is sad to have 20 people, give or take, in the audience tonight. And I think everyone should note the fact that the numbers in the audience continue to decrease. And what that says to me is that I'm going to talk about process. And there are some people in this room who don't really care to hear process, but this isn't working. So what it is doing is it's forcing PPS, other neighborhood associations to literally have their own meetings. And unfortunately, your staff doesn't come to those meetings. So there is again, all those wonderful drafts that were dropped on May 15th. It is damn near impossible for people who work to be able to read the stuff, let alone to convene board meetings, to talk about the stuff, and then to promulgate changes to what is there. So there is a better way to do this. I certainly would like us to sit down and talk about it. I would like to applaud the, shall we say, the outreach that was done at the Providence Public Library on a Saturday. It was from 10 to 2. We had 7 people there from our board, from 10 to 12. And literally, there were only 4 other people who entered the room. That was the best interaction that any neighborhood organization has had with the staff, who took copious notes and in fact included some of those recommendations in some of the revisions. So that is a process that worked. I would like to see us do something similar so that all these meetings that are happening out in the neighborhoods literally can be more productive. This is not the most productive way to do this. But again, thank you, because some of it is working. So I applaud you.
Thank you. Okay, so if there's anyone else joining us, we have someone, you can go up next. You can go on deck, and then anyone else, you can just move up to the front row and we'll call you up as we have it. So just start off by stating your name and your address.
Hi, my name is Feather Poirier. I live at 62 Moore Street in Elmwood. I'm a lifelong Providence resident. Just giving a really quick anecdote in response to some people who've stated that, they don't think housing access is a problem. My brother-in-law is a welder with 15 years of experience, you know, the kind of person that like, as we're developing Providence, you know, is really good to have around. And he and my sister and their little kids are leaving for Columbus, Ohio, explicitly because they can't find affordable housing here. So yeah, like even if it's not something that's readily visible in the numbers, like it is happening. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Lily Bogosian, and I am with the Fox Point Neighborhood Association. I want to say very briefly, I want to first applaud Sharon Steele for the remarks that she made about process. It has been very difficult to feel as though our associations are being heard, and we would like to have more direct access to you. Some of us were unable to make those library meetings, and I was hoping this evening when Deputy Azar spoke about the map and making some changes that Wickenden Street would have been among those, because our density is maximized right now with regard to the infrastructure that we can tolerate. We're already seeing, for those of you who ever go to any of the stores on Wickenden east of Benefit, we see a lot of traffic. We're seeing road rage. We're seeing behavior that we've never seen before. And so I would urge you to reconsider the priority zoning that you've applied to that section of Wickenden Street, which is not a Trader Joe's and cannot afford to see traffic increase any more than it already has. So I thank you for your time. I thank you in advance for reconsidering, please, that section of Wickenden.
Thank you.
As I tiptoe.
You don't have to sit down if you don't want. You can pull the microphone up.
My right leg is still not happy
Yeah.
sitting.
Yeah, just
So,
grab the microphone and.
Get that out of the way. Grant O'Garian, 20 Exeter Street in Providence. I have a lot to say on zoning and land use, which is something I've been paying attention to since the middle 70s. I have a lot to say on city services, which is something I've been paying to ever since I was a kid growing up, on the second floor of a 3-family house. But I'm gonna, in the limited amount of time I have today, talk about mobility. 3 things. Number 1, RIPTA. 97%, I read a report years ago, decades ago, it said 97% of the city of Providence is served by RIPTA. Well, that's going down a little bit. Why? Because we knocked out the route number 49 bus, which was the Camp Street bus. So people who live along between North Main Street and Hope Street, going north from Doyle Ave, have a long way to go to get to one of those 2 buses. And we should not allow that to happen. We should get that back in. And there are reasons why that happened. Well, the details we'll get to at the next meeting. As far as Kennedy Plaza is concerned, there's no justification for relocating Kennedy Plaza anywhere else in the city of Providence. All roads lead to Kennedy Plaza. That's where it ought to stay. However, the traffic circulation around Kennedy Plaza makes no sense at all whatsoever. So visualize this. Kennedy Plaza, bounded on the north side by Washington Street and the south side by Fulton Street. If you're driving and you want to go from the west side to the east side, you can go down either one of those 2 streets. If you want to go from the east side to the west side, you can't do either. You have to do around. Does that make any sense? No. The solution is simple. Kennedy Plaza, if you're looking at it, at the bus shelters on Kennedy Plaza, there are 4 bus shelters on the south side of Washington Street, 4 bus shelters on the north side of Fulton Street. They're bolted in the cement. You don't have to dismantle them. You can just simply unbolt them. If we simply unbolted the 4 bus shelters on the north side of Fulton Street and transitioned them, you could walk them to the north side of Washington Street. You could make Washington Street two ways, buses only. There's a little median there too. It's perfect. Then you free up Fulton Street, two ways, everybody. That would make a lot of sense for everybody. Makes a lot of sense for City of Providence, makes a lot of sense for RIPTA operating. It would make a lot of sense for the passengers, bus stops would be closer together. And it would make a lot of sense for the property owners on the south side of Fulton Street, because their parking garages would be accessible by their tenants from both directions. So everybody wins. And who can do that? The City of Providence. It's city streets. They can do that tomorrow. But let's at least do it in a month. That's number one. Number two, in mobility, I'm sorry, the buzzer rang already. I knocked out all my categories except mobility. Chairman said something which dovetails on what I'm planning on saying. And that is that Providence is an urban area. And we're surrounded by less densely populated urban areas and then very less densely populated rural areas. But what's less than 36 miles away from Providence? Newport. We have a moment in history to think differently than what the state is thinking. And the City of Providence has to take the lead in this. Right now, we have a Washington Bridge that fell apart. And the solution is to build a replacement. And what will that accomplish? Right now, and I commended DOT for this, they transitioned from 2 lanes and 1 shoulder in each direction to the existing bridge to 3 lanes in each direction. That was good. And they lowered the speed limit from 55 miles an hour to 40 miles an hour, which makes a lot of sense. They're proposing to build a replacement bridge, which will whoop-de-doo add 1 travel lane in each direction. What's the cost of that bridge? Fraction of a mile, over $250 million. And that's low compared to, that's the lowest estimate. There are other estimates that are higher. I suggest the City of Providence talk to the state of Rhode Island. You'd like to think the government can talk to government and say, before you commit to spending that kind of money for that kind of big deal add-on in this era of climate change, instead you look at an alternative. And what would the alternative be? Rail. If Boston had a Newport less than 36 miles away, they'd be looking to connect it by rail yesterday. We have an opportunity to look at that as an alternative. I'm a firm believer that the more information we have, the better decisions we make. Let's get the information on what it would take to connect Providence to Newport by rail. A lot of the infrastructure is already there. Most of the right of way is already there. And what would the economic impact be? So let's do 2 EISs, an environmental impact and an economic impact. And that's what I'm suggesting needs to happen now before the state commits to spending all this money. Now's the time to do it. I think that we would be very impressively surprised by the results. And so that's my recommendation, suggestion, the mobility category. I do have specific suggestions and recommendations in housing, land use, city services. So my hope is that you wonderful public servants, getting no pay for being public servants, and thank you very much, will have a series of meetings on section by section of this comp plan, because this comp plan is very big time, very important, and very fundamental. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone might have.
Thank you very much. Again, if you're joining us online and you'd like to speak on the comp plan, please raise your virtual hand or press *9, and we will. Press star 9 if you're calling in.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Doug Victor, and I live on Princeton Avenue in the south side in the Elmwood neighborhood. Been a resident for 40 years. When I moved there, I was actually warned by many people not to because it was so unsafe. So I've been part of making it more safe. And there's a lot of, there's still a lot to go. I chair a neighborhood organization. I'm not self-appointed. A previous mayor asked me if I would do it. And I thought long and hard about it. And I said, yeah, the neighborhood needs people like us. And when I say us, it's everybody in this room and all the people who already left. The meeting is very long and very arduous for all of us, and fatiguing. And I have to admit that I'm experiencing meeting fatigue around the comprehensive plan. I want to kind of second the comments of Sharon Steele about process and how this process could be less fatiguing. Certainly there has been an improvement, I believe, in people speaking into the microphones, because if we're sitting over there, it's really, really hard to hear. So I appreciate that very much. Oops, where are my notes? I have my notes here somewhere. When I see the goals written out, what I don't see in any of the goals, and some of them seem updated and some of them in the different categories kind of seem like the same sort of bureaucraties, sameness. What I don't see is I don't see elements of measurability under each goal, criteria for that measurability defined, and who's responsible for that. That may be in another part of the document that I haven't seen yet. I don't know. But I think that there's baseline data and baseline criteria, baseline data to work from to develop those goals. What is specifically each goal wanting to achieve, needing to achieve in the next 10 years? So how can that goal be sort of defined over the course, how those goals be defined over the course of those 10 years? Thinking about transportation, I want to bring up something that we have talked about many times, and I believe I brought it up here in a previous meeting. Many of us in the South Side were talking with the city and talking with people in the MBTA to consider having a bus hub in the south side of the city along the train tracks that go there. Behind the Walgreens on Elmwood Avenue, there's ample space for that. That would be a real change agent for the neighborhood. And that would boost people living in the neighborhood, their ability to be more mobile. And thank goodness, yes, for the R line. And I use the R line all the time. I prefer the R line over the 20 or the 22 on Elmwood Avenue. I can get to either one. I'm a bus rider. I'm 75 years old, have been a bus rider for the last 3 years. And the R line doesn't actually happen every 10 minutes or so. It took me a half an hour to get here tonight. So there's variation in how that happens. I think the R line, I agree with the R line being a model for how RIPTA needs to think about and how our city councilors need to support RIPTA thinking about, and our citizenry needs to support how RIPTA is thinking about bus routes through the city. I think it's really, really critical. Anyways, I want to thank you for your time. I know you've put a lot of effort into this, and we've not always been in agreement, and we probably never will be in total agreement. We hear a lot of different opinions and a lot of different expressed needs and desires in this process. To be fully democratic, I would say that this process, as it has been rolled out, really deserves to be looked at. So I see this as another beginning for another round of conversations, and I look forward to being part of that, even though I am registering some fatigue with the process. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We also, it doesn't seem like we have anyone online joining us right now that would like to speak, but we do have plenty of written comment that we've received from various residents throughout the city. Tim was kind enough to compile, or someone in the planning department, all of the comments from the library feedback events and collated between chapters. We all have copies of that. There's some comments from the College Hill Neighborhood Association, from Nina and her group. Obviously Sharon's comments, written comments we have as well. Mile of History Association, we received a letter from them. The Providence Urbanist Network, the Sustainability Commission, the Woonasquatucket River Watershed Council, and then another actually wonderfully done PDF presentation by someone who was joining us online earlier but is no longer here, Zoe Mueller. So we appreciate all of this, and will continue to read through all of this as we're continuing on this process. But I think that's probably all we can handle this evening. Okay, so we will be back, obviously, next month. There is a chance that next month's regular meeting will be comprehensive plan and comprehensive plan only.
Oh, it will. Yeah.
So-
Comprehensive plan, June, your next meeting is June, help me with the date, somebody. June 18th. It will be a public hearing for the comprehensive plan.
June 18th is Tuesday, June 18th is our regular meeting of the Providence City Plan Commission. And it will be only the comprehensive plan that we will be hearing that night. So with that, I will take a motion to adjourn.